So welcome back to Restless. I'm Father Joseph Gill, along with Lauren and Paul, as together we seek the face of Christ restlessly in today's mixed up and crazy world. And our world is indeed mixed up and crazy in so many ways. And it seems to me, and maybe to some other people, that perhaps there was a golden age of Christianity. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, you could argue that was not. But there certainly was a time period when Christendom was an idea. Christianity as a whole was just kind of like an arc, a kind of a permeating culture. And I guess I was thinking about this because I was cheating on our show and listening to Let Me Be Frank.
Uh-oh.
Which you can also find on Veritas Catholic Network and on Wednesdays at 12 noon.
So you're cheating by listening to your boss.
Yes, don't tell him that. But
no, that's good though.
It is good. It is
yeah,
good.
No, that's good. Then.
Yeah, and Bishop Caggiano talks about a lot of great stuff. But one of the things he talks about is the fact that he grew up in a Catholic culture. And he talks about, living in Brooklyn in the 1950s and 60s, there were processions and there were feast days and everybody knew was Catholic. You didn't know anybody that wasn't. And you didn't say what neighborhood you're from. You said what parish you belong to, because everybody in that area was Catholic. And that seems like a wonderful time to grow up. Seems like a great experience. Was there a golden age of Christianity? Was there a Christendom, whether it was in this country or just like looking at the broad scope of history, high Middle Ages? I don't know. Do you think that there was a Christendom?
Well, I would say that we're living in Christendom now by the virtue that it is the age of the church, right? So you have like three major segments, right? Well, actually four, I guess. You have pre-Abraham, right? And then you have the Jewish time, and then you have the time when Jesus is actually here, a very short period, but meaningful, I would say. And then
one might say, yeah.
And then the time of the church. And so we're living in the time of the church. So we're living in Christendom, whether folks recognize it or not. So that's kind of I would say that's kind of a definition way of looking at it. But I think you're talking about a cultural Christendom.
Yeah,
which is different. So I think we could be rest assured that we are living in Christendom. Like we are living in Christendom, but maybe
I don't like your definition of Christendom.
Well, that's what it is.
Just the fact it's the age of the church. I mean, it is, but the church seems very small and very insignificant right now, which it did not 70 years ago.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's actually grown, which is technically in the world. The church continues to grow.
Yeah,
so
yes, that's true. And
just not here.
And that is one of the hard things that's important to make a shift, I think, is that Christendom is not the same thing as Western civilization.
Correct. It's actually gone in the borders. And the extended borders of Christendom compared to Western civilization is actually where it's growing the quickest, particularly Western Africa.
Right. Africa, South America, these places that really have not been shaped by the Greco-Roman culture, by the, kind of the traditional, as it were, Western culture, quote unquote. So, yeah, okay, so there's a Christendom, I suppose, in some parts of the world, maybe?
Yeah.
But not in the West.
So when did we have it? What's the question?
See, that's a great question, right? Some people would say it's from the fall of the Roman Empire to the Enlightenment.
Yeah, maybe the Renaissance. Yeah,
seven centuries there of,
well, you have early Middle Ages, you have Middle Ages, Middle Ages, and you have late Middle Ages. So I think folks generally consider late Middle Ages to be the golden period. It's when you had the emergence of St. Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure and all these extremely influential theologians and philosophers that were reshaping the way that we think about theology by the influence of the Greco-Roman kind of philosophers and in integrating that with Western civilization as they knew it. Right. So I would say that's probably, if you had to pick a time, and it was also somewhat, you were getting past like the worst parts of the plague, right? Because that's the Dark Ages, right? You had the plague, just like not great. A third of Europe has
That's the
died.
Understatement of the year,
right? A third of
plague
Europe
was mediocre.
dies.
It's kind of meh,
right? And then, but post the plague, you had an explosion, right? When you get into the Renaissance, because now you're past the plague, and they took all this stuff that was built up during the Middle Ages and became application, and then that led into the Enlightenment. So, is it the high mid? I don't know. I mean, the Middle Ages had its good and its bad. Like, I wouldn't say that it was like the best time to be a peasant. Or a serf, like that. I mean, you were Christian, which is good generally. The very faithful Christians at that time, but we had famines and hunger, and like we had lots of wars and lots of bloodshed during this period of time too. So
yeah,
it's hard to pick a point and say. That's why I say like we are living in Christendom, because we might look at today, the 2024, the mid 2020s, let's say, and say this could be a golden age of Christendom, or at least the Catholic Church. Like, look at what we see in the media landscape. Look at how we're exporting, America at least is exporting Catholic media around the world, especially in English language speaking countries.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
Right. And you have like these conversions that are happening. I don't know, like I don't put too much emphasis in them, and I hope they're moving toward
Genuine,
Christ. Yeah. But you have Mark Wahlberg and others like that.
I'm rolling my eyes for those who can't see.
Right. But at least, it's
stay prayed up.
But like
is that his phrase?
Yeah. I think so. On
okay.
his Instagram shorts.
Right. But I'm saying that there's something there.
It's good influence though.
Yeah, like it's not. So there's
Mark
something.
Wahlberg?
Right? I mean, he's talking about prayer.
Yeah. He's on Hallow. You can pray with Mark Wahlberg on Hallow. They don't sponsor us. They should.
I'm sorry. I have an issue with Mark Wahlberg, in part because the movies he makes are so filthy.
They used to be.
They're absolutely. What has he made that's good?
He made.
Don't tell me Father Stew.
You don't
Shooter?
like that movie?
How many F-bombs are in that movie?
Well, it's quite a few.
Quite a few, from what I hear. I haven't seen it, but it's like.
Oh, the other guys, so funny.
Okay, that's Mark Wahlberg. We don't need to go into
a Mark Wahlberg.
So my point is that it's not. You had things like The Chosen and like Jonathan Rumi and all these people that. So you have there's something brewing right now. So we might look at today and say this is a golden age. Like, so we have to.
Harsh disagree.
But
please.
When you have
the
trans movement going as it has been, the satanic like trade shows, conventions popping up, people pushing for Satan
after school
in their elementary schools, like.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
there's certainly strong force for evil.
So
abortion.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a subculture in the church that is strong, certainly, without a doubt. I've been part of many organizations that are part of that subculture. But I think as a broader culture, as Lauren's pointing out, we are not a Christian culture, which we were 70 years ago.
More than we are now, yeah. But my point is not that it wasn't more Christian before. It's just that whenever we look back, we always have to realize that there could have been things in the period that you're talking about where folks might have said this is not. Well, think about the 50s, right? We always say the 50s in the United States, like that was the time. Like you're talking about Bishop Caggiano in Brooklyn, and like my mom grew up in New Haven, a very similar thing. Everyone around her was Catholic, big families. They walked to church, they walked to school that was attached to the church, right? It's very like this thing, but also in the 40s and 50s, you had
racism.
We had racism. We had terrible wars. Right.
Yeah.
We had the outbreak of communism, around the world, or not even not the outbreak, but the strengthening of communism throughout the world. So, yeah, we did. And then, if it was so strong, then we had like the sexual revolution in the 60s. So there's something there that's like, and you had everyone was saying, especially in the late 50s, you had the emergence of like rock and roll, like devil's music, right? Right. And so.
That's what they say.
Yeah. And so you always have this undercurrent where, the time you're living in. So I think it's important that we always keep in perspective that, we are in this time that we're in now for a reason, and we have to live in it and like bring people to Christ,
true. We can't turn back the clock.
Right. And also with some things, like back to my last point, you see the pushback of sort of a lot of this so-called woke things in the culture. Now maybe it's temporary, but you do see there has been some movement on that. It's not as strong as it was, and so anyway,
hard to know.
That's my hypothesis.
But I guess that's a question that really kind of this whole episode's about: is that should we seek to reclaim a culture? Because I think a culture gives props to faith, props up a faith, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that you can grow up in a culture where you can walk to church, you grow up in a culture where processions and feast days are a part of your everyday life, and you're thinking about, oh, today's the day of fasting, and this and that, and just these kind of things that they don't substitute for personal faith in Christ, but I think we need them, because to have faith when your everyday life is really kind of devoid of these external symbols is very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, should we want our broader culture to take on a Christian worldview, or should we seek after a smaller kind of countercultural movement?
Well, I think you have to
almost like a ghetto.
You almost have to do from like a Benedict option perspective. You almost have to do the latter to to get to the former, right?
Yeah.
Right. So we have to seek to grow the Christian culture for sure. And I'm not downplaying that by my prior comments.
Yeah.
But the way you do that is you have to live it yourself.
But is it even possible to shape our modern culture with more Christian values, or are we too far gone?
Well, maybe not in our lifetimes, but I think if we move
definitely
in that direction,
possible.
Sorry, yeah,
definitely possible.
Stop monopolizing the
Let's
conversation.
go broad. Let's go broad and convert the culture.
Mm.
And I totally agree. Living in community is what we're made for, and it makes living the faith so joyful and fun. So I think we're so blessed that we work in a Catholic environment. So every day we start with prayer. We sing the Salve at the end of the day. We celebrate feast days, right? I mean, there's daily mass offered. So, and if you're going to daily mass, you're much more in tune in what's happening, right, in the liturgical year. I think all those things are very important. They make the faith alive, because so many Catholics who attend mass, I think, are still just sitting in the pew, not understanding what is going on, right?
Yeah.
They do it maybe because of obligation, or they know they should.
But
it's not very deep. So if you have the whole culture living this faith together, I think it would help people like deepen their faith.
Right. But I would say that we, like, for example, both of us work at the same school, and we're blessed with a culture that's very countercultural to the rest of the world. So we have kind of like an outpost, which some people have often called, the ghetto. It's just kind of like we're certainly not Are we changing the world, by having this great school and this, this community? I don't know if we are, and I don't know if we should make that our goal or our aim. Versus,
well, yeah, I think your goal is each individual person, right? It's there. It's the formation of the students, right?
Souls.
And then those folks go out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like Cardinal Kung Academy did not exist it didn't exist a few years ago, but something like that didn't exist when I was young in the state of Connecticut.
No, and it's growing more and more.
It's growing, yeah. They're opening up
good school and
right,
but even a good Catholic community.
Yeah,
it's
lacking
important for a lot of people,
and I think folks have realized that, and so there's communities popping up. But I think like I said, I think it's a great goal to change the culture. And it's also a great goal to form really strong communities that might feel a little bit like a ghetto at first.
Yeah.
But that you break out of the ghetto though.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully you get enough people that then the tide can turn.
Unless you statutorily get trapped in the ghetto.
You mean by making rules and laws
like
to prevent you from
right.
leaving the ghetto?
I mean, in Rome, the Jewish people were like almost literally trapped in the Jewish ghetto in Rome.
Yeah, true.
I mean, you can still kind of go there. There's the big
Trastevere.
Yeah,
it's part of Rome.
And so they were literally trapped there. Like they had to get permits to leave, and it was like not a great situation in the Jewish ghetto in Rome.
Right.
And that's a statutory limitation. But I mean, in the United States at least, we don't have that. Not yet.
No, we don't. Of course not. I just wonder sometimes, so many people do kind of fight a culture war in the fact, and they think that, like, for example, voting for the right politician or changing this law or something like that is going to change the culture. And maybe not, but I just feel like that's kind of a wasted effort, in my opinion, because I think we should be focusing on forming a smaller counterculture rather than changing the broad culture, because I think the broad culture is too far gone. Because part of the idea of a culture is to have a common imagination. And that's one of the things that, like, the smells and bells of Catholicism does really well, is that it forms your Christian imagination. I don't know if you've been to Europe, but I don't know if they have it in other countries. It's probably more strong when I went to Austria. I saw a lot of, like, roadside shrines. And what's the point of a roadside shrine? I mean, nobody really stops there. The point is to form your Christian imagination, to realize as you're driving along, or when they were built back when it was horse and buggy, to make you realize there's an eternity, and we're part of a bigger story. And that, I think, is what's sorely lacking. And so that's why I think a small counterculture can help form our imagination to help see the world through a Christian worldview. Because I think the problems are not so much this law or that law, it's the whole worldview. Do you have a worldview where Christ is king and where eternity matters and your soul matters? Or do we have a worldview where we just have the liberty to do anything we want? Those are two very different worldviews.
I think you could have both at play, though, right? Because there are many Catholics who still seek a lot of worldly things, right? Like wealth and really big houses and all these great careers that make them a lot of money. But that is not what Jesus calls people to. Like
Right.
fundamentally, right? He calls people to holiness, relationship with him. But when you have those two things battling each other, I think oftentimes the world wins out because that's what the culture says. That's what most people are living for. Most people are not living for just holiness and eternity, right? I mean, unless you know, I would say religious communities who
A lot of
are
times, yeah.
poor, right? Like they've given up wealth, poverty, living poverty. They're obedient, right? They're just, I think the culture is too strong of status, wealth, honor, all of that. I think that's a battle that's within Catholics.
Well, you make a great point that I think the only way to form a culture and change a culture is to live such countercultural virtues like poverty and obedience and chastity in a world that says the opposite. Because there's, this whole idea people often say, St. Francis said, preach the gospel at all times, if necessary, use words. First of all, I never said that, and he never would say that. But St. Francis could do that. He could preach as a living sermon because he was so countercultural.
Yeah.
But people take that as an excuse to be like, well, I held the door open for someone. I'm changing the world. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Pagans hold the door open for people. There's nothing countercultural about that.
Where is your heart, right? Jesus talks a lot about the state of your heart. Our heart is supposed to be for him and truly transformed by him, right? So you could have someone who does a good thing, right? We're capable of doing good things. And yet inside they're full of envy or jealousy or lust, right? Their heart is compromised by the devil, by their sins. So that requires
but that's
Christ.
the challenge,
Doesn't make you a good person. I'm sorry, because you hold a door open. Like,
right. But that's
the battle is deeper, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
It is a lot deeper, absolutely. And that's the challenge, that there's a lot of baptized pagans, to quote, I think it was Sherry Waddell who said that they have they don't have a Christian worldview. They don't have a Christian understanding of the world. But they're sacramentalized. They have baptism, they have confirmation. They may even go to Mass every Sunday. But when it comes to the choices that they make, when it comes to the way in which they view work or sex or relationships or money, it's a very secular view.
Right.
So I think that's the battle, is the Christian imagination, which is why the externals of our faith are not unimportant. Things like incense, because incense takes you out of modern day world into something that's different. Nobody uses incense unless you're a hippie.
And there's definitely a peace that comes over you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's tangible, I think.
Yeah. And pilgrimages and things like, things that are very like visceral, because we're sensory people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why, a lot of more devout Catholics now do seek out more, even if it's not the Latin Mass, but it's more traditional practices within their own Catholic churches. I don't think that's universal. It's kind of a little bit Northeast and places in the Midwest, but it does kind of spread across the United States now too, and it's starting to influence other parts of the world. That we do have a bit of a return to that, thankfully, because it wasn't part of the tradition. I mean, we would use incense like twice a year at my church growing up.
Oh, maybe Holy Thursday. That was the only time I can remember it.
Maybe 3
growing up.
I think.
Wow.
I think.
Yeah, actually, I don't remember it either.
Midnight Mass. I was an altar boy, so I remember Midnight Mass.
Now it's every Sunday.
And
Do you really?
It's great.
Really? Every
Yeah,
Sunday?
same with Holy Spirit. Yeah.
Wow. I do it for big feast days. I did it for Christ the King this year.
Oh, no, St.
Christmas.
John's, of course, they do it at the noon.
Yeah.
So I think it's becoming a bit more. It's becoming a bit more common, I would say, at least in the more devout circles.
Sure.
Because in some sense, parishioners are asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good thing. There's a return to chant, like you hear Latin spoken again. There's no Latin growing up.
Oh no, never.
Very true.
Never.
Right.
Ever.
I mean, so there is. I don't know. I have hope. Maybe I'm just blindly hopeful. But I just.
That's kind of a nice way to be.
But I think it's true though. I think there is a little bit of and to be honest, like the only people that are having a lot of babies are like Catholics and Orthodox Jews. So at some point, math wins. But but I mean, Fulton Sheen said that given the immigration and given the amount of kids people are having in the Catholic community, he projected that the United States was the next Catholic country.
Huh,
we're still a minority. It's the largest denomination of Christianity, but we're not 50% or close to it.
Yeah.
So, but I think it showed a little bit of that, what you were talking about. But I think go on.
So here's a question, because I think one of the really wrong-headed directions of the documents of Vatican II. Like I think Vatican II is a wonderful thing. It did great things for the church, but I think one of the documents in particular, Lumen Gentium, I think, or was it Gaudium et Spes? I think Gaudium et Spes had a total wrong-headed direction, because it talked to the whole title of that is the church in the modern world, and the idea was, well, what we need to do is become more like the modern world to minister to the modern world. Should we do that, or should we kind of stand so far apart from the modern world that to come into the Catholic Church is jarring, something different? I think it's the latter. I don't know what your thoughts are. Because like that was the whole idea of like, well, let's have like folk masses and let's have, priests in jeans and t-shirts, because we want to be able to. It did end up being corny, but I think the idea came from, well, let's fit into the modern world rather than standing out.
Yeah, I think standing out certainly right now seems to be the way to go. That's my opinion.
But so you're saying being authentically Catholic is standing out versus adopting to modern culture and I don't know, like trendy ways with the music and stuff.
Yeah, music. I mean, not only of course in the interior we have to remain faithful to Christ, but like in the exterior too. Like how different should we be? For example, should a priest wear a cassock versus the black, just the black suit?
Right.
It seems like a small thing, but a cassock's significantly different because you don't see people in that. It's so jarring.
Yeah. Well, I think I would look into the kind of the Hasidic Jewish population, and they do look different. When they walk around New York City or Stanford or wherever, and there's, I don't know, I'm kind of, I kind of give them a lot of credit for that. That they're willing to say, like, this is so important that I'm going to stand outside. I think, like, Jewish populations have done that over time, probably more than Catholic populations, because they haven't looked to claim a culture just based on their theology.
Well, God was very specific in the Old Testament, and the reason he gave them 613 laws is because they needed to form a culture, right? They'd just come out of Egypt. They didn't know who they were. They spoke Egyptian. They talked like Egyptians. They walked like Egyptians. Sorry.
Well, they were, and they were enslaved.
And they were right. So they didn't know who to be. So God was like, here's your hairstyle, here's your clothing, here's your diet, like things that are going to really set you apart from the other nations, because that's how you were going to find your identity.
Right.
And it used to be, certainly back in the 50s and before, the Catholics had a very unique identity. Like the rest of the world knew us as fish eaters.
Oh,
right? Because we eat fish on Fridays. Or this, we're known for our rosaries, and we're known for this and that, And when all that went away and we started to blend in, I think we did lose our values, because people were like, well, let's focus on the interior and not the exterior. But the two are so connected.
I think you have to do both, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's generally like what's good for the soul is good for the body. What's good for the body is good for the soul. What's good for the mind is good for the body. What's good for the soul. So, because we're all like human.
Right.
We are human. We are an integrated person. And so the way we dress, the way we show ourselves externally to the world influences how we are potentially internally.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why we talk about modesty a lot and things like that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I've been reading Thomas Kempis's Imitation of Christ quite a bit. I reread it periodically. It's such a great spiritual book. Have you guys ever read it?
No.
Highly recommend it.
Okay.
But, he is certainly writing in his time. And one of the things he writes about is this idea of contemptus mundi, the contempt of the world. This idea that the world is, not something that we should embrace, but something that we should kind of seek to flee from, in a sense.
Yeah.
And I think there's a balance there, right? Because the world is good in and of itself. But
well, if the world is corrupting you, then you have to leave it, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, because there's something you can only. We are human and we are sinners, so we have agency, but we also are temptable and can be influenced by others, by the devil. So, we have to flee from that if it's the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like I said, I think when we say reclaiming Christendom, so I think that's more of my thing. So we are living in Christendom, but we have to reclaim it. It's like, no, this is ours. This is our thing. And I think there's some hope, right? I'm blindly hopeful.
You're a very hopeful person.
So I would say that, like, for example, I heard this from some Catholic YouTuber person, but the fact that, so we tend to bemoan the secularization of Christmas, right? Presents and Christmas music and decorations and like whatever, like all the things. But at least we have the 25th off. By and large, throughout the country, people have December 25th off. Still,
I hope. Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope.
and people do. Like,
they do.
Yeah, and so
because it falls near Hanukkah. But
well, I mean, Jewish
so
population
the holiday.
Is very small. But anyway,
it is. But goodness, everybody gets Rosh Hashanah off.
In this area,
maybe
you go outside of Jewish areas, there's no Rosh Hashanah.
I don't know. In my town of Monroe, all the kids get Rosh Hashanah off, and I think there's like 5 Jewish people in the town. Like, it's so small.
In any case, it's in Northeast and like
maybe
parts of like Chicago and Los Angeles. Like
that's fair.
It's not as widespread as you might think. But anyway, but yeah, so I would say that we get the 25th off. That is like that's something you can see that people know that Easter is happening generally. It's actually less and less, which is sad. But people know when Easter is happening, so at least there's something.
But, that was a comment that somebody made about Europe. I forget who it was, maybe Bishop Barron. He said that Europe is forgetting that they were even Christian at one point.
Right.
It's one thing to reject Christianity and be like, yeah, I'm not into that. But now they're even forgetting that they ever were. Because the generations have passed on, and it's so against faith. And I've quoted this before, and I can't get the exact quote. I can't remember it, but it was something like, I think C.S. Lewis said, it was easier to evangelize in the 600s and 700s because it was all new. Now we're evangelizing a jaded culture that's heard echoes of it.
Right.
And they've rejected it.
Yeah, where churches are museums. They're not churches.
Yeah,
I mean, they technically are churches, but...
And the whole idea of Christianity is so ludicrous.
Yeah.
It's not like they've never heard it. It's just they've heard it. And they never heard the fullness of it probably, but...
Right.
So I fear... See, you're very hopeful. I'm kind of a little more pessimistic. And I fear
I'm kind of an optimist.
I fear we're heading that direction. Like, for example, when I teach confirmation class, one of the first... recently I was teaching them about the death of Jesus. And I said, all right, guys, what holiday celebrates the death of Jesus? And they're like, Christmas? No, try again. Easter? No, try again.
Easter's a little closer than Christmas.
It is, but then I'm like, but then I said, it's not Easter. Okay, so what does Easter celebrate? Jesus' birth? I don't know. Is that when the angels showed up to Mary? You're just like, what? So I think we are in kind of such a post-Christian culture that you can't even presume that people that call themselves Christian have any idea what Christianity is about at all.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a coworker, and that actually, Christmas in particular, that did come up. And for me, I don't even think about, I just know Christmas. It's like Christmas isn't something I contemplate the meaning of, maybe in a deeper way, but not like, what is it? Well, it's like birthday of Jesus. Like, it's like as simple as that.
Obviously, right?
Right? Yeah, no, but it actually is true. The very people that didn't grow up with any hint of Christianity actually don't know that.
So they may be celebrating it. That's the thing. They're celebrating it, but they're celebrating with Santa and Rudolph and this and that. I mean, good for them. But that's how gutted we have become of the truth of our Christianity. We've got external structures, but nothing inside.
Yeah.
So how do we bring it back? I don't know. I think small communities personally, because I don't think people are often let's put the 10 Commandments in schools. Let's, put manger scenes out. I mean, I think that's so limited because if you don't have the Christian understanding, then it's just window dressing. Mm-hmm. The deeper meaning of what does it mean to be Christian?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm pessimistic.
I remember I was interviewing a guy and he was talking about, he lives in Jersey and I work in New York City. So we've got people tri-state area, right? So he lives in Jersey and he just mentioned kind of in passing. So we were just talking about what do you do for fun? He's like, oh, my wife and I, we're kind of involved with this church in Jersey. We're not that involved though. He had to I'm like, you don't know who you're talking to, but he doesn't know.
I'm not like a freak or nothing.
Yeah. He's like, we're not that involved, But it was like, what? You can be it's okay. You can be involved with the church. Right.
Check out my podcast.
Right. Well, I can't say that, but unfortunately,
if you like and subscribe, you get the job.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, but I thought that was really funny that it used to be, it is true. When people, I remember on Ash Wednesday once, a bunch of my coworkers who are actually probably baptized Catholics. We have a lot of kind of people that are baptized Catholics. I work for a European company and that's kind of the way it is. And I remember on Ash Wednesday, everyone goes and gets ashes. And I remember, they asked one of my coworkers asked me, is Paul, are you going to go get ashes? I said, well, I'm going to go to mass tonight, and I'll get my ashes there. And she's like, oh.
Is that where you get them?
Yeah, it's really? No, she got ashes. She just walked in St. Patrick's. I work close to St. Patrick's. Got ashes and walk out.
So anyway. Get yourself. That's funny because I remember giving ashes one time at the Marchetti's restaurant here in Stamford.
Yeah,
and because their workers often could not get off for Ash Wednesday. It's fine. So I went in there, and then I'm walking through the restaurant around lunchtime, and these two patrons who are sitting there having dinner are like, "Can you give us ashes?" So I walk over to their table and I look down and I totally judged them in my head because they're both eating chicken. It's fasting and abstinence. It's Ash Wednesday. And I'm like, Yeah, sure. Sprinkled some ashes on the chicken. Is that? I went across the table again. But I was like, wow, and some people are like, well, that's really great. But I think to me, that's almost like it's a missed opportunity because you can't focus on the externals. The externals are meant to direct you to the internals.
Right.
But if you don't have that direction, then the externals are actually kind of like backfire, I believe.
Yeah, that's why I don't know if you, but I know a lot of churches will do like the liturgy, the word service thing.
Oh yeah, I don't do any ashes without
something,
without the gospel being proclaimed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's smart.
Because let's give everyone on the street rosaries. Well, what are they going to do with it? They're going to wear it around their neck.
Yeah.
That's not like, why am I giving you a rosary if you don't understand how to pray it and what prayer means? And so
I think what gives me hope are more things like Eucharistic processions, like we had on May 22nd in Stanford.
You even remember the day?
Yeah, I remember the day.
Wow.
My birthday's the next day.
Oh.
It's pretty easy.
Happy birthday. 6 months.
So we had hundreds of people turn up, right?
We did,
where it came through, where I was involved, was 3 Catholic schools. But if we can get to thousands of people, right, that to me would be amazing. And so we did it in the southern part of the diocese, and they just recently did it in the northern part of the diocese, right? And
they're coming to my part of the diocese, Trumbull, Monroe, pretty soon, Shelton. Great.
So it's growing and it's continuing. I think those kinds of things, right? Okay, there's people eating chicken on Ash Wednesday, but there's something in them that gives them that desire, right? Oh, wait a minute. Maybe they didn't realize it was Ash Wednesday. I used to do that. I should get ashes. They don't have the formation clearly, but there's something there, and it takes courage to ask a stranger.
Yeah, I guess so.
Right? That takes a little bit of courage to speak up and say something. So I think we could reach people like that with movements, such as Eucharistic processions, where people may not know what's going on, but if they have that inspiration of like, maybe I should go to that, and then the faith moves them, right? Jesus is present.
Yeah.
So he will bring them further, I would think.
That's the key, is that we want people to ask questions. Do something.
Yeah, why do you do that?
Live in such a way where they're asking that question. Why do you do that?
Oh, so your faith is important to you? Yes.
Yeah, and what does it mean? Why?
Yes, it is. I just got asked that at a lunch at a funeral. It's very funny.
What do they ask?
Oh, that exact question. Because I said that I work in a Catholic school, and people always assume I'm a teacher. So I have to say, oh, no, I'm not a teacher. But she had this line of, do you want to switch to public schools? I'm like, no. I love my job because I'm in a Catholic community. That's what I love about it. Oh, so the faith is important to you? Yes. And then it just ends there. Like, okay.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
I don't know. I guess I'm going back to the.
You shut down the conversation with that.
How deep are people? Like in their spirituality and their understanding. It's probably very shallow, but anyway.
Yeah, but there's
I love more movements like processions and.
Yeah, the one in Indianapolis is quite inspiring. I wish I was able to go.
Heard great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like tens of thousands.
I mean, we made a cross across the country, right, with the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage, and then Trump won. And have you guys heard this? I've heard it from a few religious people saying that Trump will help restore faith in God in this country. Most recently by Father Justin Sinante, Carmelite.
Oh, you know Father
Carmelites are spiritual. Yeah. He's at Iona Prep.
Everyone knows Father Justin.
He told that to Trump directly.
Yeah, he did.
At MSG before the election. All right. When you are elected, you will help restore faith in God in this country.
Well, I hope he's right. Because
that's the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and the Holy Spirit can work through.
I don't think we need to doubt.
I don't know that Trump is the most faith-filled person himself.
I don't think that matters,
I don't
right?
think it matters either.
God uses any instrument he wants, as he's done throughout the history of the world.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
Yeah.
You gotta play your role in human history.
Yeah, so anyway, I like processions. I think we got to do up our holidays, our feast days much bigger.
Yeah.
Promote them, make them more public. Just get people coming. And then, like you said, asking questions. Because I think the knowledge can come second.
Yeah.
It's really like the faith is first, or like the desire for God. And the good thing we have about, this like anti-God culture is I think we're now experiencing the rebound of that. Right? Because the devil just brings misery. Yeah. So people have been believing the lies that have been put out there, and I probably just more depressed, more lonely, right? We know these are statistics. People are lonely,
right,
and on a lot of drugs, for their mental health and all that. But Christ is a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And there are Catholic and other Christian communities, I think, that are growing, and people are responding to that. So if we can continue that, bring more people in, then form them. I think the Catholics who are lukewarm is harder, right? Lukewarm is it's one of the most challenging.
Because you think what Christianity is all about.
And you're maybe going to Mass, but there's really no spiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or people are in mortal sin and they don't know it.
Yeah.
And I always wonder about that. Like, how is that affecting them? It's hard to understand, right, what being in a state of mortal sin actually means for your faith.
Well, I think it does cloud your judgment.
Okay.
Definitely.
And probably your conscience is clouded, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's harder
Yeah,
to me, but I have hope.
Yeah, so if you have all these people in the world kind of living this, as Lauren said, like living in sin just on a regular, but actually don't know it, and it clouds your judgment, it's like, wow, it's like no wonder we're in the spot we are, broader culture. That being said, I'm still hopeful. But I do understand the kind of the depth of what we're going through right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like there's always an attraction to being countercultural for a subset of people. There's some people that don't want to be countercultural. They just want to be as much in whatever is in vogue as possible. But there's always a group of people that want to be countercultural.
I want to be countercultural.
Right.
And that was a big draw for me even as a teenager. So I got more into my faith because if you want to rebel, don't do drugs. Don't drink. Everyone else is drinking and doing drugs. Right. Truly rebelling is turning to Christ.
Yeah. And so we see that a little bit, I think. It's kind of, maybe not in the Christian sense, but it's kind of becoming more acceptable to be more conservative.
That's definitely true. Oh, yeah. That is definitely true.
And I think there's something to that. Even in secular culture, there's men I don't, but because it looks terrible, but, men are growing beards and doing things that are kind of stereotypically manly or masculine, right? May not be living any faith or anything like that. But there is something there. In the wider culture, and so maybe we can harness that,
tap into it,
and move people, maybe toward that, but also toward Christ.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us in this episode of Restless. I suppose the summary is that we should always have hope, because you guys are very hopeful, and that's a good thing.
I'd say do your part. Be courageous. Speak about the faith.
Yeah.
And the parts of the faith you're living in your everyday life.
Yeah, we may not be able to reclaim some distant past, but we're put in this location in this time period specifically for this reason, to minister to the people that we're around, and that's it.
Are you going to help save souls?
Amen.
And most importantly, listen to Veritas and tell others about it.
Right, 103.9 FM and 103.5.5. 10:35. What is it?
1350 AM.
1350. There we go. I'm sorry.
I was waiting. I was waiting.
I'm going crazy right now. Yeah. Anyway, and listen to us wherever you get your podcast.
Because of post-production edit.
So
tune in. Share.
Tune in next time.